Peace, family. Y'all know what it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba of LumumbaSpeaks.com, back with a great show, once again in conjunction with Bequine Network, the Pan African Social Media Extraordinaire, and the home of African Centered News and Information. And we're going to be discussing a lesson from Candace Owens, why you should never support white supremacists. Many of you, of course, saw the thumbnail. There was a picture posted on Truth Show Social by, of course, President Trump. So we're going to get into the lesson that can be learned here very quickly, family. If you're watching, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and of course, donate to the show via Cash App, Venmo, and of course, the Super Chat. Great show I think we have today. First and foremost, before we get started, I would be remiss, of course, as a Pan African, if we did not acknowledge that today is the 34th anniversary of the start of the LA rebellion. Many people call it a riot. We call it a rebellion. Of course, many of you who have been around as long as I have, or maybe haven't been around as long as I have, the LA rebellion, the riot as them folks called it, but the rebellion began with the precursor was, of course, the savage beating of Rodney King by, of course, LA city police officers, right? He was driving in a Hyundai, if I remember correctly, speeding, some type of traffic infraction. And as a result, he was stopped, got out the vehicle, and was summarily just brutalized by the police officers. Though many people may be unaware, but what led, of course, to the rebellion, to the revolt, was the fact that the officers were found not guilty during the trial. So there was an actual trial in the Los Angeles County, and the officers were found not guilty. Of course, as a result, there was a visceral reaction by the Black community that led to later there being federal charges filed, and of course the officers were found guilty. But what led to, of course, wasn't simply the assault, but the fact that the officers were found not guilty in the brutal and nearly deadly beating of course, Rodney King in April in 1992. Of course, this is the 34th anniversary of the start of the LA rebellion. We call it a rebellion whenever African people fight back against oppression. We call it, of course, a rebellion rather than a riot. We know that this was organized. There was, of course, even some attacks, unfortunately, but we understand politically it was politically motivated against, of course, Korean shop owners who, of course, treated African people in a very inhumane manner. Of course, many of you may have seen, of course, the parody of this in the movie Don't Be a Menace by Drinking Your Juice in the Hood, and of course, the film Menace to Society, right? In which, of course, hurry up and buy, hurry up and buy, hurry up and buy. This is something that was parodied, but something just to be cognizant of in terms of today's Black History Fact is today is the 34th anniversary of the start of the LA rebellion, not riot, but rebellion that took place as a result of the African community in Los Angeles responding to the officers that were responsible for Rodney King's assault being found not guilty in a, of course, trial in Los Angeles County. By the state, of course, the state of California found them not guilty. The officers were later subsequently tried and convicted in federal court for civil rights violations. But just wanted to make people aware of that. So once again, family, if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit the notification bell as well. You're watching, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black in conjunction, family, in conjunction with our network, the Pan-African Social Media Extraordinaire, and the home of African-centered news and information. So we're going to be discussing Candace Owens. Many of you should know who Candace Owens is. If you don't, we give you a brief background. Of course, something that's rather peculiar. Today is Candace Owens' birthday. She was born April 29, 1989 in White Plains, New York. And so today is her birthday. Candace Amber Owens Farmer, of course, she is married now, is an African-American political commentator, author, and conspiracy theorist. Yes, she is a conspiracy theorist nowadays. Her political positions have mostly been described as conservative or far-right. She has promoted conspiracy theories on a wide range of subjects throughout her career. Since 2024, she has espoused anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Owens gained initial recognition for her conservative activism. Right, she created Blexit, of course, along with former Tucson police officer Brandon Tatum. She worked for PragerU. She worked for Turning Point USA. And of course, she even was a co-host on the Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro. She left and, of course, became a bit of a conspiracy theorist. But one of the things I think is important that we bring up is oftentimes we know that our people in the community typically take umbrage with the Democratic Party, which I would agree with. I don't have an issue with someone viewing them in a problematic manner. We've even done shows on this issue before. But the concern is turning to, of course, the Republican Party. I tend to espouse that doing so, going from Democratic to Republican, is tantamount to going from Christian to Muslim. It's a lateral move, right? Because we know Christianity and Islam are both Abrahamic religions that have a long and virulent history of anti-Black racism from their inception. And we know that the Democratic and Republican parties are both white supremacist organizations, right? This is a reality. We could look at the support for it. Is it real? We could look at, of course, the neo-colonial and imperialistic of American government. I can recall vividly, this is probably a couple months ago when it was still cold outside, or rather particularly cold, right? Still kind of chilly here in Ohio, where there was a lady said, I think if Kamala Harris won the election, we wouldn't be in Iran. And I said, I beg to differ. She said, why? I said, because America's foreign policy is rooted in imperialism. Irrespective of what political party, what gender occupies the Oval Office. So we went all the way back, even pre-World War II. And I highlighted that irrespective of who was in the Oval Office, irrespective of the political party that was in the Oval Office, America's foreign policy is and has always been imperialism. In fact, you could make an argument that America's foreign policy since the Monroe Doctrine that I believe came out in the 1820s has been imperialism, right? So just make that very clear. So it's a lateral move. So many individuals in our community are disenchanted. You see, Mr. K says Candace Owens get 10 out of 10 being articulate in her information, but gets a 0 out of 10 for being accurate in her context information. I would agree wholeheartedly. And so what we tend to find is individuals are disenchanted. They understand that with the Democratic Party, it's symbolism, not substance. I would agree 100%. Oftentimes in African-American politics, one of the weaknesses of African-American politics is symbolism over substance. The person looks like you, but they offer no actual real political, economic, or social value or empowerment, right? Inaccurate. Very good. And so people go to the Republican Party. We saw this concept and idea of Brexit, right? I'm off the plantation, right? So on and so forth. And now we're in the second Trump administration. This is a Republican administration, and people have nothing to show for it. Many of you may be aware, maybe 3 years ago, we did a show, a reaction show to Candace Owens when she was on the Breakfast Club. And we broke down how every claim she made was a half-truth. She would start very slick. She's very slick with a factual statement, but then she would end with a statement that was at the verge of facts. This is why, of course, you have to be well-read. You have to do your research so that you understand when individuals are trying to manipulate or trying to con you, so on and so forth, politically. I could also vividly recall that there was a time where she stated that everything was better during the Trump administration. It just was, but she gave no data. There wasn't any data, statistics to substantiate the claim that she made. It simply was a narrative, right? She's had a falling out with Trump. I would argue that much of this is performative, but now we see how she's being treated, right? And so this is a lesson for any African person on the planet, right? Really on the planet. When we're talking about caping for them folks, caping for individuals who are anti-Black, caping for individuals who are suspected of, and oftentimes are white supremacists. No one, and I would argue in the history of mankind, particularly as a collective on the macro level, there are some individuals who have done things for Black people and they weren't looking for anything in return. A great example would be the white woman who, of course, aided Assata Shakur in escaping prison, right? So, for example, this woman, she's a white woman, she was found responsible or guilty for aiding her escape, Assata Shakur's escape, and she spent nearly her entire life in federal prison until she was released on a compassionate release because she, of course, I think she was terminally ill. So there are some examples. John Brown would be an example, but on a macro level, that's not a reality. We have to understand when we're being used. I would argue, and even Brother Dwayne, who of course is the resident historian here at Lamont, has averred this as well. They're going to use you, and when you have lost your utility, they will do away with you. This is a reality. This is how it works. Even if you take umbrage with the way we may do some things, and I'm always for it. Anyone knows me, I am one of the most ardent supporters of internal critique of the way we do business, socially, politically, economically, familially. I am one of the ardent supporters of internal critique, what we would call intra-racial rather than interracial, right? Critique. But we have to understand that they're only using you. And when you have served your purpose, they will do away with you. This is the reality of how things work. Let's see here. Mr. Kevin says, and she gives no cross-reference to scholarly source materials. Absolutely. Mr. Sandman, happy Pan African Wednesday. Candace Owens was bought and paid for to push propaganda to Black voters. I would agree. And I think we even did a show on Black conservatives several years ago, and we talked about, of course, I was citing, of course, some scholarly literature, some books I actually purchased. Like, this is something I covered when I would teach. And we talked about how there's a concept called an organic Black conservative and an inorganic Black conservative. Ashe Black Power. And what we tend to find is most of the Black conservatives today are grifters, just like most even Black Democrats are grifters. So I just be honest here. We find this on both sides, but the issue was they were being paid to promote these concepts and ideas, right? Literally paid, right? Conservative think tanks recruiting Black students on campus who may be socially marginalized or may feel uncomfortable with their racial identity, or may simply, for reasons unbeknownst to us, want to identify with what? Whites. And they take that person, I would argue, groom down, give them some talking points, and then put them out in front of the world to disseminate their, of course, their perspective, right? This is something that's been going on for, you could probably argue, time immemorial, right? But something to consider. So I'm gonna put the link in the chat, family. The link is in the description. Link is now in the chat. Tap in, be part of the conversation. What lesson do you believe we can learn from Candace Owens, right? Particularly her fallout with Trump. We know that she was MAGA. She was, MAGA to the 10th power, right? And now we see this is the situation. Yes, Thomas Sowell is bought and paid for. Absolutely. He's bought and paid for as well, right? So typically what we tend to find, particularly with Republicans, Black conservatives like Candace Owens, they will highlight particular issues, right, that are pertinent to the Black community. But the solution is just emulate white folks, right? We even found this in the manosphere, right, for a bit of time, where individuals was like, well, we need to be like the Western powers, right? And I said, well, there's a lot that comes with that: imperialism, genocide, 2 world wars that decimated a quarter of the world's population. There's a lot that comes with that, right? And so what we tend to find, a lot of individuals are not well read, right? Oftentimes they're not even well spoken, right, or well traveled. And really, what we tend to find, and this is just my opinion, of course, you can tap in and you can, of course, disagree, is there's a push to try to gain proximity to whiteness or what they perceive to be white concepts or ideas, right? Many argue this is done because they believe there will be a social, political, economic benefit in doing so. People don't tend to grift unless they believe there's something they can get out of it in return. And so this would be an example. Right, so Candace Owens, she has a platform now. She can go on now and espouse conspiracy theories. But immaterial of all of that is what is pertinent here is the fact that what? She's in a situation where she's now being thrown on the bus. They could give two you-know-what about her, but she's done them, of course, a whole lot of good, right? They're in a position of power. Many of you may be unaware that the Civil Rights Act in Louisiana was just scuttled, right, really slashed in half to where it now lacks any power or utility, right? And so these are things to consider when we talk about aligning with individuals who I would argue really don't have our best interests at heart. Dr. John Henry Clark taught us that what we have no permanent friends or permanent enemies, simply permanent interests. And I think part of the issue, and I'm going to use some civil rights language here, is that we lack the capacity or ability on a macro level to keep our eyes on the prize. Right, and understanding that this is about power and access to resources. I recall vividly, maybe over 20 years ago, Ryan McGlynn. She, of course, was a state senator. She resigned that position to become mayor of Dayton, and she, if I remember correctly, was running for re-election. It was a white man who was a political novice, had never ran for political office in any way, shape, or form. And what ended up taking place or transpiring was they went around to black churches and said, well, Mayor McGlynn is suspected to be a lesbian, so you shouldn't vote for her. And they fell for it. And then guess what happened? The white guy got into office, became mayor, and there were no resources or in any development being, of course, taking place in the black community. So West Dayton is overwhelmingly predominantly black. So we have to understand these things and keep our eyes on the prize. But part of this is because many of our people are politically immature. Let's just be honest here, politically immature, politically inept, don't have any understanding of what politics is actually about. We know the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We know we can't mention Dr. King without mentioning Coretta Scott King. If any of you are unaware, her birthday was this past Monday, right? Coretta Scott King's birthday was Monday, and if she was still here with us, she would have been 99 years old, right? So definitely want to give a shout out to Queen Mother Coretta Scott. But part of the issue is many of our people have no understanding of what politics is actually about. Dr. King taught us politics is the business, keyword, the business of who gets what, when, where, and how. That most people in America have no understanding what politics is all about, right? And so part of this, of course, is representative of course, the dumbing down of the American electorate. And that is done particularly so that those in power can then engage in behaviors and actions that are, of course, not in the interest of the community and the interest of their, of course, constituents with impunity. So once again, family, tap in. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe, share. Make sure you hit that super chat as well. You're watching LumumbaSpeaks.com in conjunction with Beacon Network. We're discussing a lesson from Candace Owens, why you should never support white supremacists. Let's see, Mr. K says, these black Republican grifters love to sensationalize the internal dilemmas within the black community. I agree wholeheartedly. Since the moment I started this show, I believe that if you're serious about helping the black community, you have to have conversations regarding what? Internal dynamics and external dynamics, right? When we talk about internally, we're talking about the disempowering, self-destructive, and racially, of course, disempowering manner in which we live our daily lives on a macro level. And then externally, we have to discuss anti-black racism, discrimination, police genocide, etc. Food apartheid, because it's not a desert. Desert is something that's organic. Apartheid is something that's manufactured politically, socially, etc., economically. But they tend to do that as a way to what? Make sure they're not putting the focus on the external enemies of the black community. So you're cooking with fish grease there, Mr. K. You're cooking with fish grease. I agree with you 100%. So, but tap in, family. I want to hear what you all have to say regarding a lesson from Candace Owens. So, Confucius once stated, you can learn from anyone, right? So many people would argue, I never thought you would do a show talking about what we can learn from Candace Owens, but you can learn from anyone, good or bad, right? You can sometimes learn that someone's doing something pejorative, what not to do. And I would argue in this situation, we're learning that. Now, if you're someone who's a grifter, you're someone who just wants to get to the bag, then of course that would be your lane. But if you're someone who has a genuine care, concern, and interest of empowering and bettering the black community, of course, then that's not the way to go. And we have to look at what are the ways that we can disseminate information in our community that is beneficial, right? So tap in, family. Once again, the link is in the description, the link is in the chat. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. Yes, shout out to RBGTs. Is that where you got your hoodie? Absolutely, yes. RBGTs, absolutely. You can go online, rbgts.com, because we got the red, black, and green on the side. I thought I'd bring out something fresh today. But yes, RBGTs is where I got it. I've purchased a lot of gear from RBGTs, so definitely want to give them a shout out. Also, am a connoisseur of Tally and Twine watches. So many people may be unaware of Tally and Twine. They are a black-owned, watch company. They manufacture their own watches, Tally and Twine. A lot of people talk about they have a Rolly. I have a Tally and Twine. Shout out to TT. And so I try to support black businesses as much as I can. And so Tally and Twine is one of those black businesses that I support. That it gives me a way to practice Ujamaa year-round on a diurnal basis, right? And we know Ujamaa, of course, is the fourth principle of Kwanzaa, which teaches us that we should engage in cooperative economics and of course build and support our own stores and shops and profit from them together. So anytime you have a chance to support a black business, particularly a black business that does great work, that has a great product and has great customer service, we want to make sure that we give them a shout out here on our channel. But tap in, family, we're discussing Candace Owens, right, and why you should never support white supremacists. Tap in. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Also, family, as you may know, if you want to, of course, can't be part of the live, you do not have to cam. You do not have to cam up. You do not have to cam up. You can use a pseudonym to protect your identity. Understand that many times. And I see you, LMA. I'm going to bring you in momentarily. You may be having some technical difficulties, but once you tap back in, our brother from VA is going to drop in, and we're going to make sure he holds it down as he always does. One of the things that we tend to find, unfortunately, is I lost my train of thought, but the LMA was in queue, right? But one of the things that we tend to find, unfortunately, regarding this situation with Republicans, Democrats, etc., is they're on the payroll. We got to be honest with you, they're on the payroll, and so we have to really look at authentic voices that are independent, right? One of the things that I've always promoted and argued or averred or pined is that we have to develop our own leaders, right? We have to put our money behind an individual that we believe has the capacity and ability to be a viable political representative for us. And then we have to make sure that we, of course, support their campaign so that they're not being bought and sold by the, of course, establishment Democratic or Republican parties. I've always stated that anyone, and I have a very strong critique of Stephen A. Smith, particularly just as a sports commentator. I think obviously he doesn't know what the French sauce he's talking about. But even politically, he says, well, we should look at the Republican Party. I said, the Republican Party they aren't even in marketing. They aren't even in any way, shape, or form trying to make a move to gain the black vote. Right? So something to consider there, right? So I always argue that whenever someone is making a claim like that, they are disingenuous. And so we have to make sure that we're listening to black voices that are intelligent, who are educated, well-educated, and understand, of course, the issues that we're facing. You can turn your camera off, LMA, and then we can bring you back in the queue. I can take you out of the queue, put you back on the live. Understand what's truly going on. But once again, family, tap in the show at Lesson from Candace Owens. Once again, you can learn from anyone, and we're learning from Candace Owens today, which is actually her birthday, right? And that is, of course, why you should never support white supremacists. But LMA, what's the word? Talk to me. Mr. Sandman.
Yeah, can you hear me? I didn't know if you was talking to LMA or me.
Yeah, I think you have technical difficulties once again.
Oh, all right. Yeah, man. You know, politics really is my forte. You know, a lot of stuff goes into, you know, the politic games. It's all about your talk game. It's all about manipulating the masses
Right.
and influencing people to follow your agenda. You know, that's not like my forte or anything that I specialize in, but you know, I try to like keep an illogical eye on, you know, what these politicians are trying to tell us. You know, I actually pay attention to what they're saying as opposed to just, you know, being influenced by the way that they speak and being guided by emotions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and being guided by emotions. I'm actually listening to what you got to say. Does it make logical sense? Is it beneficial for me and for my demographic? Is it beneficial for the country at large? What are all of the ramifications of the things that you're talking about? And I look at it objectively like that. You know, a lot of people they're moved by, you know, the way that certain people speak. They're moved by, you know, just their emotions basically, and they're not really even paying attention to the agenda. So, and I think, you know, a lot of these politicians, they know that most people don't really critique them critically when they speak. They just they know that they identify with certain aspects of the and things that they can relate to, so they just play on that, you know.
But if I could interject, I go beyond just what they say. I look at what they do, right? Because people say all
Hmm.
types of things, right? But when it comes down to you have individuals, of course, representing your particular electoral district, state, etc. We have to look at what policies are being created that are benefiting my community or aren't benefiting the community. For example, this is back before I was old enough to vote in the 90s. George Vornovich was he was a Republican, and he became mayor of the city of Cleveland, Ohio, in I believe the late 80s, early 90s, and he became mayor of a black and people of color dominant city. Why? Because his policies were beneficial to, of course, the Democrat, the constituency that he served. He later became governor, if I remember correctly, of the state of Ohio. Right? Why? Won in the landslide, if I remember correctly. And then he did what? He became a state senator. And he even though he was a Republican, he gained a large amount of the black vote. And every time he ran for a statewide election, why? Because his policies were beneficial to the black community. So how a person speaks is immaterial for me. Right? Once again, that comes down to symbolism, in my opinion. What is most important is the policies the person is willing to initiate to benefit our community. Policy, policy, policy.
Right, exactly. And you know, we know though, you know, that a lot of these people are moved by their emotions and by symbolism. So sometimes you gotta pit that individual out there in front of the public that can move those people that are moved by symbolism just to get the job done. So you kind of look at it like a bell curve or statistical analysis, and most of these voting, you know, polls are based on statistical analysis. They'll say, well, uh, they'll say what 80% of the public will be in this sentimental, you know, area, or they'll look at politics to identify with the person that's representing them more so. And then there'll be 10%. Then there'll be 10% of the voting class that have no idea who they're going to vote for or what their agenda is. They're just, you know, just following the lead of the majority. And then there'll be another 10% that actually are paying attention to the policies, or and actually, you know, using their brains to critically analyze what the politician is talking about. So a lot of these politicians that get thrown out in front of the public, they're going to say, well, we need to get that 80%, because if we can get that 80% of that, or the majority of that 80%, our odds of winning it rises exponentially. They're not even going to worry about the 10% of people that's actually paying attention to politics or paying attention to what the politician is actually saying. So that's the game that they play. So it's like that's why I don't even like when you say, well, um you actually watch what the person does. Yeah, and I do too. I want to see if, you know, if I judge that the politician is actually, you know, seems like they're serious about the stuff that they're pushing, the propaganda that they're pushing, or the policies that they're pushing. Do they follow through with what they're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And then I also got to think, well, how does them follow through with that particular agenda or those particular policies not only affect my demographic, but they also affect the demographic of the people that might not be a part of my, you know, community or what have you. and how does that affect all of us at large? So it's like a sort of like a balancing act of trying to determine which is the best, because you can't say that I want a politician who's 100% only down for the development of the black community and is going to completely ignore the white people. And then what happens when the white people get completely ignored? Then they have like then they start to like push against the system, and then their agenda becomes like to circumvent or to bring down what we're pushing. There's need to be like a give and take when you're in the melting pot like the United States is, and we just gotta, as black people, we just gotta realize that, hey, we only make up what 10 to 15%
12% of the American population.
Of the American population. So if our politicians focus is just on the benefit of that 12%, and they disenchant the other
But
85%.
I don't think that will be done. You simply have to create policies that serve your constituency, right? When we talk about democratic democracy as a political model, the focus is that you serve the will of your constituents. But let me ask you this question: what can we learn from Candace Owens regarding, of course, her why you should never support white supremacists?
She should.
I said, what lesson can we learn from her?
Yeah, the lesson that we should learn from her is that, hey, if you're going to grift, go ahead, get in there, get your money, and then step away. You know what I mean? She tried to like I don't know what made her change or switch up on the Republican Party and the propaganda that she was pushing from the past. But if it was like some disagreement with her constituents or the people that she was working with, she should have left the business like instead of making it personal and like really pitting her own emotional personal beliefs into it. Because once you do that and you open yourself up to the public to be victimized or to be critiqued by your opponents, they're going to take every advantage that they can to tear you down. That's is was good for the goose is good for the gander, like they say. Um there's no honor amongst thieves. She got into the politics game. If you want to play with them, you want to play with that fire, then don't get mad when you get burnt. She shouldn't play games with them people.
And we do know that, of course, she had a falling out with Ben Shapiro when she began to criticize some of the actions and other. Is it real as Brother LMA calls it, government? So we do know that. But I would disagree. I don't think we should be promoting anyone being a grifter. But I think we should promote our people. If that you're going to go into what many people call the new media, that you have a responsibility, particularly if you have respect for your people. Of course, we know that is highly questionable regarding Candace Owens having respect for her people, for her race, for the community that she comes from, that you provide information that is sound and accurate, right? We don't want to miseducate or misinform our people because the enemies of African people do that on a diurnal basis, right? And so, but I think part of it is one of the lessons we can learn is that our people need to understand that here's the reality of the situation. Whenever you seek to align yourself, yes, so brother says no grifters, yes. Seek to align yourself with them folks or suspected white supremacists. Reality situation, they're only using you until they can get what they want. So I'm gonna have an inner child moment for a moment, family. Tell you all a brief story. Grew up, of course, in the 90s and grew up watching X-Men, the animated series. So of course, one of the things my dad did to help stimulate my love of learning and of course promote literacy was he would purchase me comic books. And I was a big Marvel comic books guy. And so Then the animated series comes out in 1992. So I'm glued to the television every Saturday morning watching X-Men. And there's a scene where and some of the X-Men, we're talking about Storm, Jubilee, and I believe Gambit, they go to Genosha Island for a vacation. Unknowingly, unbeknownst to them, Genosha is a slave colony. They're captured, they're enslaved. And so Jubilee says, hey, we're going to try to start a rebellion. We're going to fight back. And Gambit snitched on her. Right. And so they're like, oh, my gosh, how could you do this? You turned on us, etc. And Gambit used it as an opportunity to get close to whoever's in charge to kind of find a way to free everybody, which he successfully did. But one of the guys said, well, why should we trust you? And one of the enslavers said, why should we? He says, well, he said, I don't like them. They just using me the way you are, right? So he knew that he was being used. He played them against each other to actually gain the power and capacity to help liberate the brothers and sisters, the mutants that were being enslaved on Genosha, right? So I think oftentimes because there's such a desire for white acceptance, for white approval, for being able to be in proximity with whiteness, they don't realize that they're being used. Right. And we can say this for Black people on the left as well. We can talk about Black people who are patriotic. Right. My son sent me a text message maybe a week or two ago talking about what branch of the military should I join? I said none. I sent him a quote from Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, talking about Black people shouldn't join the military. All you're doing is being imperialist, and you are what? Killing folks, and you're deleting people to the benefit of course, of American power, particularly Wall Street. Right. And so we have to have a African-centered frame of reference when we're looking at issues politically, socially, economically, etc. How does this benefit our people? So I would argue one lesson, you shouldn't be grifting at all. And as Dr. John Henry Clark said, if you go over there, you got to stay over there. Right. And then number two, if you're going to engage in any type of propaganda, any type of media, any type of literature, we need to make sure that it is accurate, an accurate assessment, an accurate representation of what is taking place and transpiring. Brother LMA, I hope that you can still tap in from you because I haven't heard from you in a while. Sister Michelle, what's the word? Highlight your boy.
Hey, good evening. How are you this evening? Good evening.
I'm doing happy Pan-African Wednesday, sister. I'm doing very well.
Thank you. Happy Pan-African Wednesday to the panel as well.
So you go right here. I want to hear your thoughts. What lesson can we learn from your sister?
No, sir. No, sir.
Your girl.
No, sir. Oh, no.
Well, I mean, let me ask you this question. Do you identify as a Black woman?
Yes, I do.
All right. So you don't have a Raven Simone thing going on. Great. And
no.
Is Candace Owens a Black woman?
Biologically, yes. But
just
how
saying
she presents herself.
No.
Yes.
Okay, got you. Okay, so you're saying she's a what, Negro opinion?
Yes, she is, very much so.
Okay, go right ahead, sister. What lesson can we learn? And then, of course, we would give you the floor.
At the end of the day, you never prosper when you sell out your core. The core, your root of who you are. Regardless of how bad it is or not so good or compromised, your core is your core. Black people, our history, Black people, African people, diaspora, yes, we have a compromised history, but it doesn't give you a reason to degrade it, disrespect it. Everybody finds a way to see the beauty in their culture and themselves and the history of their people. Candace Owens, her claim to fame was disparaging us. And when she went to high school, she had a racial incident. And when she even had to call the NAACP to come help her. But okay, all that was forgotten as she was climbing her chair to fame. Okay. But when Trump put that picture up on her like that, I said, wow. Now, again, I didn't like it at all. But I do believe this other lady, Loomer, may be behind it. That's a whole other dynamic when itself. But the thing about what Candace Owens did, if she had stayed true to her people, they wouldn't even have thought about it because they know the Black community would have came down on them so hard they couldn't stop it because they know she's alone. That's why they were able to do the things they do. And that's why sellouts. sellouts always get their wake up call, because the reason why you get your wake up call, because you exclude yourself from your community, your core. That when you need your ACE card, no one's able to be found, because Trump, somebody in that camp with us. Okay, when the Obamas did the monkey thing, Trump tried to do the monkey thing. They had to pull it down. Yes, I got my issues with Obama, but because Obama still has a strong black core, the black community said, you're not doing this. So they knew they had to do
this. And I don't mean to cut you off, but I think you made a great point. You said Obama had a strong black core. Should Obama have had a strong black core?
I'm 50-50 on it.
Break it down. Explain it to us.
I'm 50-50 on it, because you have a black family going for the White House. But symbolism. Yeah, symbolism. And I bought it because you have to understand, I work in the community. I want to see a black man and black woman together. And to see it on the highest level, I have to respect that.
Well, so let me back up just very quick. You said you have to respect that.
For me,
right. So what about Mobutu Seseko in Congo, when he changed the name to Zaire? He was married to a black woman, then in a position of power, but he ran the country into the ground and was a crony for the United States, for the West, and played a role in assisting in the assassination of course, my namesake, Patrice Emery Lumumba.
Okay, then this is in
a position of power.
In a position of power, but he was corrupted.
Right. So the point I'm making is that I could care less about something like that. It's symbolism. Okay. I care about the policies, the politics. Do your politics benefit my community? I could give a crap if Obama was married to an albino woman. I don't care if he was laying down with a sex doll every day. Seriously.
Okay, I mean, I understand your perspective, but I work
politically and economically.
Yeah, but also I deal with people who are not familiar with Mobutu at all. I mean, United States government, the President of the United States is like the government of the world. I'm just going to be plain and simple. To see that on that stage, yes, that is an issue with Mobutu. But I'm talking from perspective of the globalized world. The image of a black man and black woman to be together, that was for me.
Mobutu, yes, but his politics were what? Imperialistic and anti-African.
Oh yes, very much so. So
what matters? Something substantial or the symbolism of he's with a black woman? What really matters?
But then it goes back to us as a people, because I believe because when Obama got his second term, and when Trayvon Martin's situation happened, that's when the red flags were up for me. Like, wow, dude. So this is where you go.
What about when he got on television in September of 2011 and lied to the American government about why they were invading Libya?
Yeah, that destroyed Africa. Right.
I mean, this is why we have the issues that we have going on in the Sahel, where there's of course violence, terroristic violence, because of what the vacuum that invading Libya, creating a failed state, created.
I do believe his presidency was an effort to blindside us to what's really happening on the continent. I do believe that.
Yeah, it was AFRICOM. They needed to put a black face on American imperialism. That's the reality. So the point I make, let me see here. East Shore ENT says it could be a white family White House if they advocate for policies to empower the black community. Exactly. I could give a damn what the race is. Do you create policies that empower my community? Socially, politically,
but then if you want to talk about Obama, we got to talk about the CBC, NAACP, all these other entities.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't care if you can have 2 reptilian people married. And literally, if they create policies that are beneficial to my community, so politically and economically, you have my vote. I give an example, and this is how politically immature we are as a people. I'm gonna break this down. I'm gonna give it to Brother LMA, who's been waiting patiently. Shout out to VA, right? Michelle Obama. Obama does his 8 years in the White House, in the Oval Office. BET runs a special. Michelle Obama, forever our first lady. What the French toast did she do that was substantially beneficial to the black community? Absolutely nothing. I tell people all the time, the person for the African American community that is forever our first lady Wasn't a woman who was attractive at all. In fact, many argue she looked like a dog. Can anyone tell me, like a dog? Can anyone tell me who she was?
Harriet Tubman.
Anyone on the panel? First lady.
Maureen Bethune. No.
First lady. We're talking about somebody who was the first lady, married to the president, but she actually used that position to advocate for the Black community.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Correct. Is she Black? Absolutely not. Is she attractive? Absolutely not. We have to focus on substance, not symbolism. Kendra King, in her book, Contemporary African American Politics, talks about this very issue. She said this is the weakness of African American politics. We focus on symbolism and not substance. As long as the person looks like you, we're happy, even if they're selling you down a river. Could they take a great picture, but then the politics don't matter? This is a problem.
Okay. If I may, not to get us too off subject, I know you want to give it to MLA, then we need to talk about the Clayton and Meg Thee Stallion situation right now. But that's another topic.
No, we don't. We don't do celebrity gossip over here. Both of them are immaterial.
Well, how are they? Because you have said the youth are looking at them. The youth are looking at them. So how are they immaterial? How can we ignore them? Again, I don't want to. I know this is your show, but yeah.
I know what. So I would say this much: if the youth are looking at Meg Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson, then that means we've failed our youth. Because what our youth should be doing, and we know the African proverb states, what the ruin of a nation begins at home as people. The first model or image that they should be looking at for a relationship is what? In the home. So something to consider. Brother LMA.
Dr. Lumumba, can you hear me now?
I hear you just fine.
Man, I'm telling you. Hey, great show today. So the topic, what can we learn from? This is a tough one for me. I've never been a fan of Candace Owens. But as you know, back in my previous life, I was a little bit on the conservative side. So I can see, how can I say it? I can see the trap that she fell into. Because I once I fell into that trap. But luckily, there were no cameras. We didn't have social media by the time I got out of it. So I was able, so no one would know unless I told them. So when it comes to when you lay down with white supremacy, you got to know who you're laying down with. Now, I'm not going to say that, how can I put it, that the Black community is beyond reproach. You can make criticisms of the Black community. We all do it all the time, right? But when you do it in service to white supremacy, when you do it in service to another community, another community that's hostile to us, to me, the idea of a grifter is always, it's not, how can I put it? It's kind of foreign to me because, when I was a conservative, I believed this stuff. Like, this is what I believe. I couldn't imagine getting up there and saying things that I didn't believe and just making bank off of it. Like going around having public, with a microphone in my face, saying these things that I don't believe. So it's kind of hard for me to really think whether or not she's being a grifter or not. But I can understand her being caught up in this because, like I said, it's an easy trap to fall into. Because, like I said, everyone makes criticisms of, anyone should be able to make criticism of the Black community, right?
Right.
And there are some conservative talking points that are easily, you can say, okay, if you don't know anything else, any further analysis, deeper analysis, it's easy to fall into that trap. So I think for the Black community, it's like, how do we create an environment where that type of behavior is unacceptable? Like not just unacceptable, but how do we create an environment where this type of thing, the conservative or the white supremacist talking points don't take root? You know what I'm saying? So that there was I was watching, there was a guy on YouTube, and he brought up a funny concept, and I never thought about it. It was called the YouTube reaction to conservative pipeline. And on YouTube, you all seen the category of people who react to other videos, right? So they react to, the model is, you react to music you never heard before, right? So let's say we got a bunch of Gen Zers, right? And they never listened to music from the 70s, right? So they're listening to the 70s and they're getting an affinity for old style
Old school, yeah.
yeah, old school music, right? So then, obviously in the comment section, the older people are telling them, oh, you got to try listening to the Beatles, listen to this song by Journey, listen to this song by Motown, listen to this song by, insert, whatever. And you can see that the YouTuber his mind is beginning to shift. So now he's listening to a lot more, how can I put it? What we call, music coming from Caucasians. He's building up an affinity for these Caucasians. And then someone in the audience, in the comment section says, hey, listen to this video by Tom and Soul. And then they'll listen to it. And without any other, deeper analysis or historical context, they'll latch on to it. And then you'll see them.
If I could interject, and I understand, but if I could, just very quickly, I agree and I disagree with you.
Okay.
You're an educated brother, you're well read, right? So when you were spewing these talking points, you actually believed it. But the reason why I say this, I disagree, is because I've gone on other platforms, other YouTube channels, other podcasts, and challenged them on the arguments they were making. And they didn't know anything. And you find out they actually didn't know anything. They simply was promoting a talking point. For example, there was a black woman who's married to a white man. She ran for, I think, state rep in Baltimore, which is, of course, a Democratic stronghold. She lost on a show with Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, and she talked about, well, the Congo had never been colonized. And he's like, what are you talking about? The Congo was colonized. King Leopold did it. So I went on, of course, No Fugazi's podcast.
Yeah.
And the guy was promoting conservative talking points. I sought to press him. I asked him questions. He had no idea what he was talking about. So I would argue oftentimes simply grifting. They're saying these things. This is what's in the algorithm. This is what's prominent, and this is what is popular. So this is what I'm going to say to get paid. We saw this particularly in the manosphere, where the promotion was what women shouldn't have the right to vote. Right? All of a sudden, all these black YouTubers became conservative, started advocating for Trump. These are individuals who were extremely critical of Trump during his first presidential administration. Had nothing good. Always did a show on what Trump was doing that was problematic. How he had a high turnover rate. He was firing people a week or two after they were being hired. The dysfunctionalism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, oh, we're rocking with Trump, even though he didn't say or do anything that would lead one to believe that his administration would be beneficial to our community. Why? Because this was part of the algorithm. This was part of the grip. So what this really shows is our people, many of our people in these spaces lack integrity. That's what this shows.
Yeah.
They don't actually care about black people at all. And this isn't just on the right. This is on the left as well. They don't actually care about black people at all. This is about making money. And I'm not opposed to making money. Get your bag. We live in a material society, a material world. You need money to be able to live, to do things, and take care for yourself. Got it 100%. Hallelujah, right? But we have a problem here because you're prostituting, as my cousin would say, you're prostituting your own community. You're prostituting your culture.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Here, very quickly, 3 million members of the black fraternities and sororities are symbolism. Also, over 100 years, they haven't used their resources to create policies for us, and no independent advocates in the schools. I would agree. But I'm always asked why I did not pledge Greek. And I said, well, one, it was beneath me. I'm not Greek. I'm African American. I'm African. So number two, I say these organizations aren't black-minded. So why would I join something like that? And a lot of this comes out of elitism, where the history of these organizations were what? Maybe not the iotas, but overwhelmingly the other divine eight, as you could say, if we exclude the iota, created at Morgan State in the 1960s. They were created for what? Non-traditional students based on, and they want to promote, of course, the philosophies, the opinions of Malcolm X. A lot of these organizations were rooted in what? The African-American elite. And to be considered part of the African-American elite, you not only had to come from money, but you also had to have what? European parentage. This is real. I mean, I've read literature on this. You had to have what? European parentage. Because what happens is, back during, of course, the Holocaust of enslavement, if you were of mixed race, right? If your mother, unfortunately, was the victim of sexual assault, SA, by the slave master, then the slave master oftentimes would be what? but would feel for the child, allow the child to be educated, leave them some money. And this is historically how the African American elite were created, based on individuals who were of mixed racial ancestry. The fact that they received some type of philanthropic support from their white daddy, who was a slave master. Right. So these are things to consider, that this is the history of the organization and where it comes from. Of those organizations, where it comes from. Appreciate you, brother D1 Beats. Absolutely. So just something to consider, something to be cognizant of. The other issue was the individuals, and this is just my position. I know some brothers who are solid, but the majority of the individuals that I met when I was an undergraduate who wanted to try to recruit me were cornballs. Right. And so here's the thing. I come from the real hood, not the rap hood. Right. So when I'm in college because I want to gain an education so I can have a career to support myself and my children. There were individuals who were going to college and were trying to act like they were thugs. If you're a thug, you wouldn't be here. Right. So this is one of the reasons I never pledged to a Greek letter organization. But go right ahead. Yeah. Go right ahead.
Yeah. No. The good thing, I kind of forgot my point now. But yeah. But I do think that as a community, we need to figure out. I mean, it's going to be, it's a tough sell, but how do we how do we prevent the next Candace Owens from coming from our ranks?
Well, I don't think we actually can prevent that, because, it's dollars and cents and money talk. So they're going to find someone who's politically aloof, socially ostracized from the Black community, has an antagonistic relationship with their racial identity, who's willing to take their money and then promote these talking points. But what we have to do is make sure these are individuals who don't make any headway in our community. That's the issue. Right? Because we're always going to have individuals who are traitors of the race. I mean, this is time immemorial, right? But what we have to focus on is they have no headway. They have no currency, no credibility whatsoever. Yeah. And that's something we have to do on an individual and, of course, institutional and collective level.
Yeah. Because, one thing I was thinking about, like, how do we prevent, and like I said, we have a lot of people who are, how can I put it, they're not as politically or educated, just not as astute. And how do we prevent their dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party or liberals in general, and keep that from being the fuel for them going into the Republican Party? Because I've seen it a few times where just like, brother, you just have a problem with the Democratic Party. There's no reason for you to jump to the Republicans. You just, you know what I'm saying? You may not, just be independent or there's other third parties, but there's no reason for you to jump to the Republicans just because you take issue with one or two policies with the Democrats.
I voted Green Party probably the last 4 or 5 presidential elections, because their politics align with mine. So very quick, let me read this. The D9 had that brown paper bag test facts, saying that one needs to have high concentration of European heritage. They push to go vote, but don't want us to get organized first. They claim to be educated. Yes, I mean, we saw this with the stroll to the polls, right? Where they strolled to the polls. So it was all about, and Sister Benika Thomas, she came on the platform and she talked about these are political stunts. She talked about political stunts being done, but there wasn't any actual policy that they were advocating for or wanted us to support. Just political stunts. Stroll to the polls. No vote, no voting, no something. You all know what I'm talking about. I think it was Trina was one of the individuals that was on that song.
Honey. No voting, no honey. And
no voting, no honey. Yeah, so a lot of it is political stunts. Right? And these are coming from the individuals who are supposed to be what Du Bois said were what? The talented 10.
But however, they realized those type of mantras they were doing, trying to put the Meg Thee Stallion, actually splitted the Black community, because we wanted to be, there was a portion of Black, I was reading an article, a portion of the Black community who wanted to be, you wouldn't advertise this way to other communities, but why with us, you make it sexualizing us, joking with us, not really seriously addressing issues that are needed in the Black community.
Yes. And so, and what that shows is that speaks to the fact that these political parties don't take us serious as a demographic of people. That's what that shows. It shows that they don't take us serious, right? When you tell me you're concerned with my community by interviewing Cardi B,
And a lot of black men spoke out against that, and then they used the black woman to say, because when black women, it was mostly, per my recollection, a lot of black men spoke against when Cardi B was speaking on the Democratic Party.
They're being sexist, they're being
exactly,
they're being patriarchal, when actually they were being politically mature, right? And so we heard this again with, of course, when Kamala was when she didn't win the election, and people argue it was because of black men. So I look at data. I don't care about narratives. I look at data. When somebody tries to provide me a narrative, I stop them right there. Let me stop you right there. Let's clean this up. Black men in this country, statistically, the data shows, are the most progressive voters in the country. We vote for women and LGBTQ candidates at a higher rate than all other racial groups of men in the country. So I say, shut it up. I don't want to hear it. That you're showing me that you're what? You are what? A slave to the narrative. Yeah, absolutely. So we got to push back on that. Once again, that is a claim that is averse to facts. Brother LMA.
No, yeah. But I think that when it comes to a lesson that we can learn from her, yeah, why we should never, the point is, like, your people, whether you hate them or you love them, they're still your people. And you cannot align yourself with someone who despises your people. Even if you have criticism yourself, you can never align with someone. And I don't know, I think that the history of, of black people is just not, I gotta put it, it was lost for a long time, right? Like, I think, like, this, since social media, there was like a resurgence, right? Because, I remember when I was in high school, our, black history was, we got here, we were enslaved, then there was the Civil War, then Martin Luther King had a dream, and then everything was, peachy clean after that. That was,
right.
Black American history, that I can remember. So I do like the fact that, and so I can imagine that a lot of people who grew up in that may not have the strongest, racial self-esteem, racial group esteem. Yeah. And so that just, like I said, that's where the batch of, sellouts, that's where you're going to get them from. And I think that, with our, with this, kind of like last, maybe 16 years or whatever, this push for this kind of social media push of, like, just kind of putting out, Black history. So now you see people like, I'm on YouTube more than I should be, but I see a lot of people who are, I can tell they're doing their thing. They're not, they're like Gen Z, they're younger, but they have a way better understanding. Even if they don't have all the dates right, they don't have all of the characters right. They have the premise, but like the major points of slavery in America, the Jim Crow and all this other stuff. Because, a lot of people didn't even know Jim Crow happened. You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad that, our people are seeing it now. But I think that it was just that lack of education that really makes people susceptible. And because that's my thing. It's just, as long as I feel like we have like a general understanding, we're going to have less Candace Owens. And if for the Candace Owens we do have, there's less damage that she can do because everyone's going to be able to see through her BS. Yeah,
because
and so I think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm done.
And I think that's a great point. I can recall vividly. This is 9 years ago. I was at a Black Man's Conference at The Ohio State University. There was a brother who he's marketed as an intellectual in Jordans, and he said, I wrote a book based on what Trayvon Martin being deleted. Says okay, so he gets up there. He gives a emotionally distant speech, and in the speech he starts talking about how Black fatherhood is a pathological concentration on pathological behavioral attitudes such as violence, aggression, control, etc. So I said, well, one, this has nothing to do with Trayvon Martin being deleted. This is what you said your talk in your book was about. I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, are you a father? He said, no. I said, do you want to be a father? He says, no. I said, so where is this critique of Black fatherhood coming from? So one of the arguments he made was, well, the problem is that Black men, we've adopted the ideology of our oppressors. I said, okay, well, what ideology is that? He says patriarchy, and we should all be feminists. I said, but that's strange because feminism was created by white women, and they've been oppressors of black men as well. He gets quiet, and so I sharpshooted his talk because there were young impressionable men in the room, right? And so when he saw, and this guy actually knows what he's talking about. This is someone who has a working knowledge of African history. He shut the French toast up and just said, "Okay, I'm just going to end my talk." And then we had a conversation offline. And I said, "Man, who's paying you? Who's paying you?" Because it's obvious you're being paid or you've been brainwashed. Something's going on here. Either you've been duped and you're trying to dupe us. But I said you're making claims that are opposed to facts. So it's also important that those of us who we are in spaces and someone is making claims or promoting a narrative that is opposed to facts, that we push back on that and we push back with factual information. Of course, here we always talk about what you attack the argument, not the person.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So Dr. Lalumba. So my next question, as we talk about Candace Owens, because Candace Owens,
your girl, your black woman, sisterhood. You got to stick together, sister.
Oh gosh, I don't think she wants me as her sister because
Right.
She has a whole different crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Again, she made her way to the top by grifting, selling out black people, and this is her ultimate reward. Again, I didn't like it when I saw it. Luckily for her, the biggest distraction was that situation at the White House event. So that put her situation on the back burner a bit.
Yeah.
Are you going to do a show on the alleged assassin?
I didn't think I would. You know, I'd be quite honest with you. I think some of these assassination attempts are staged. I'm just going to be quite honest with you. And I give you an example. I was talking to my uncle about this, one of my uncles about this, where there's a situation where Trump was at the rally. I was even talking to my dad about this, and the young man or the gentleman, I shouldn't use the word gentleman, I use that loosely, has a rifle, sniper rifle. He has 3 shots and he doesn't hit them. I mean, I've shot a sniper rifle before. I was in the military. I'm quite sure LMA, you probably shot one as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like playing Duck Hunt on Nintendo. It's hard to miss. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah. Once you got like a distance scope. Yeah.
If you got a scope, it's hard to miss. I mean, it really is. But
obviously take a distance.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying take a distance. Depending on the distance. Yeah. Like I was looking at that. What was it called? The barn. Not the barn. Was the one in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
I was looking at that one. Like I said, the dude went up there with. He had no. I believe the rifle had no scope on it. And I'm just like, you're not really going to do much without. Like. So that one was kind of weird to me because I'm like, yeah, you could have. Because especially like I said, if you go out hunting and stuff like that, you would know, you would have a hunting rifle, so you would. So it is what it is.
Yeah,
but
I
have no proof. But
Mr. Sandman, go right ahead.
Yeah, I was in the Army and we shot the AR. We shot the M16, the M4, 249.
Yeah, I had the M249. That was actually my service weapon. Yeah.
They normally give the squad automatic weapon to the bigger guys because it's heavier. But yeah, I mean, after a certain amount of distance, the bullet starts to drop. Right. And you have to compensate for that. I don't know if that kid in Pennsylvania had a sniper rifle. I think he just had an AR-15, which is similar to a M16 or whatever. Mm-hmm. But like y'all was saying about these grifters though, and that made me think of some things. So you was talking about before in the past that how criminality, that mentality is kind of something that's learned inside the home. Would you say that being politically inept or being a grifter or a person who sells out their own demographic or their own people is something that Candace Owens might have learned in her home?
Well, I mean, I think some of it is individuals simply being opportunistic. I think another aspect of it is one may not be taught to be a grifter in the home, but one may be taught to not have a level of racial pride or pride in one's community, right? I think that's something that Sister Michelle spoke to. Sister Michelle, because if I remember correctly, you have a background in social work. Would you argue that when you're working with Black people, maybe even Black youth, you realize that they may not have a sense of a strong racial identity or positive racial identity?
Oh yes. Oh yes, definitely. Definitely.
Yes, and so that makes you one susceptible to what being taken advantage of and working against your own best interests. But and for example, when I'm going to shut up and then give it back to you, Sister Michelle, Charles Mills in his seminal text, The Racial Contract, talks about this. And everyone, if you haven't read the book, The Racial Contract, you should. This is, of course, as a canonical text in the field of Black studies. He talks about that one of the goals of the racial contract was what? Miseducation, right? He talks about miseducation on the continent, of course, in the Caribbean, and of course here in the good old US of A, right? He cites, of course, the work of Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He cites the work of what takes place with Aboriginals, and then, of course, in the United States, the work of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. But one of the things he talks about is that part of the goal of the miseducation machine is psychologically to dupe people of color into believing that what? The imperialism that they're victims of at the hands of white supremacists was actually to protect them from their own culture. It says, and when you get someone to believe that, they become willing participants in the racial contract without even knowing it. He said that's why the racial contract is so problematic, right? Because it comes off as if it's voluntaristic, even though it's not.
You said the book is called Original Contract?
The Racial Contract.
The Racial Contract. Okay.
Yes,
all right, thank you.
Yes. Yes. And it is a banger. Reading that book is like listening to Nas's Illmatic, listening to what? Life After Death or Ready to Die, listening to a Tribe Called Quest album, listening to Thriller, right? I mean, it literally is at that level. It's canonical. It's canonical text. It's like reading Souls of Black Folk or Assata Shakur's memoir or Malcolm X's autobiography. I mean, it is at that level.
Is it on audio?
I don't know, but I'm
just asking, but I'm gonna look it up on Amazon. No worries. Thank you.
$3-4. Yeah.
Can you say the book again?
I will put it in the chat.
Dr. Lumba, we may need to get a book club.
You know what? Absolutely. We can make that happen. So yes, it's The Racial Contract by Charles Mills. By Charles Mills. He was a brother from Jamaica. He was from Jamaica. Yes. Yeah. Charles Mills. Yeah, he was at the University of Chicago. That's where he taught. And of course, he examines how the Western social contract, of course, plays a role in, of course, European expansionism, racism over the past 500 years. So, yes, The Racial Contract is on Amazon right now. Ooh, $25. Oh, other used and new, it starts at $2.40 paperback used. So, it won't cost you much. But it is a banger. In fact, The Racial Contract, that book was actually the substratum of my dissertation.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So,
is your dissertation published for public viewing yet?
Yes, you could go on to yes, if you could put my name in and put in dissertation, it should come up. Matter of fact, let me look right now.
Hey, Dr. Lumumba, I got a question for you once you're done.
I didn't do it, number one. Yeah, again, let me pull this up very quickly. Let's see here. Yep. Here. Yes. All right. Give me a second. Share my screen and boom. So if you go to ProQuest, you can put it in and it will come up. I hope you all can see that. On Intersectional Ground, examining the efficacy of Black culture centers in the age of intersectionality. Yeah, there's 246 pages of the best I've ever wrote. So yeah, 246. And so you should be able to log in and then download it. So yeah.
You said that's ProQuest?
Yes. Yeah. And it's 200. It's not. I mean, it's 246 pages. So yeah.
Hey, Dr. Lumumba, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So, assuming, let's say, we got the difference between her being a grifter and her being the actual, she actually believes this, and then for whatever reason, she comes to the conclusion that, you know what, I may have been wrong. Black people, Dr. Lumumba, agent of the black people, please forgive me. What do you say?
That's a great question. So I think you have to have a conversation. I would argue that I think there are some people who have done such amount of harm and damage to the black community that's innumerable in nature that we can't accept you back just based on principle. So let's give you an example, and we'll take away from politics, and hopefully this can help crystallize my position. Let's say you had someone who was a miscreant, someone who went on a deletion spree, and in the process of engaging in a series of crimes, deleted 5 black people. He's sentenced to life with the possibility of parole in 50 years. And he says, I don't give a bleep, 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 F black people, etc. And the person goes to prison and they reform themselves. Yeah, a great example would be Stanley Tuku Williams, King of the Crips, right? Founder of the Crips.
Yep.
Do we allow that person then? Do we then advocate for that person's release? Now, I of course, am familiar with Tuki's story. I read his memoir, Blue Rage, Black Redemption. Great book, by the way. It is a banger. No pun intended, right? Because we're not set tripping here, right?
Yeah.
But I would have advocated for what? Him to simply receive life, right? Because he did, even though he stated he was innocent of the crimes he was convicted of, he had engaged in a long and unceremonious amount of bloodletting in the black community. Right. So I think it depends on the amount of damage that was done. In my opinion, Candace Owens in my book will always be persona non grata.
Okay.
But what happens?
Me personally.
Sorry.
So go ahead, Sister Michelle. Go ahead, Sister Michelle. Then we'll pass it to Brother Sandman. Go ahead, Sister Michelle.
Now, I was just saying, what happens if she would say, okay, I did this to black. Not only she's sorry, she's willing to donate money. She's willing to, do community service. And then say, hey, I made a mistake, and this is what I'm going to do to show I'm sorry. Not just saying I'm a quick sorry. Because she does have a powerful platform.
Well, and of course, we're looking at a situation in which this is all about, we're speculating if this would happen. This is hypothetical. But, I mean, she's married to a white man. And she stated that she married a white man because she wanted to be married to someone who was smart. So, I mean, this is all hypothetical, but I don't think you could go that far unless you're dealing with a real issue of self-hatred. And when all of us, you can argue, living here in the death decades and dysphoria of the Western world may have struggled with it at some time. I know I did. But when you go to that far and you've done that amount of harm, for me, it's like, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this is just my personal opinion. I'm not saying that anyone needs to think the way that I do when it comes to this particular question. But for me and my person, if you've done harm that I believe is unforgivable, you can't come back. For example, R. Kelly, I love his music, but I hope he never gets out of prison. Michael Jackson, I love his music, but I believe he should have been in prison. Okay, go right ahead. You can push back, brother.
Hey, can anybody else hear me?
Yeah, we hear you just fine. Go right ahead, Ella, man.
Sorry. Mr. Sandman was supposed to be next.
Yeah, let Sandman go next.
Okay.
Yeah, individuals like the Tuki Williams, I don't know about that guy, you know what I mean? Like, I think he's a little bit of a coward if he's going, put in all that energy to kill black people, and then when the white police officers come knocking on his door, he surrenders. I think he's a punk. And I wouldn't even want him back. But as for Candace Williams, man, if she had surrendered and said that she made a mistake, I would have to see her back up what she talking about. Like, like what you were saying before, like she has to back up what she's talking about, because if she is a grifter, then you might be able to say a person who's a grifter is like a narcissist, and a narcissistic person will use any and everybody to get what they want, so they can play the role like they're sincere about the way that they feel and that they love black people all of a sudden, but they could just be using black people just like they were using white people for grifting. So I don't know, man. Is she really? Will she ever really be rehabilitated, or is this like some type of mental psychosis she has, where she gets off on taking advantage of people for monetary gain? So I don't know. Some people just can't be rehabilitated. We'll see if she really does believe in what she's talking about, because if
Yeah, I think
she
yeah.
is that manipulative that she can take advantage of people like that with no regard, then I don't know, man. Maybe she can be rehabilitated.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. One, I think you made a great point about Tukey, but the second issue about Candace is, I'm you're dead on there, because the reality of the situation is she allegedly had a rebrand where she was trying to brand herself as pro-black. And then, of course, that didn't work. She went right back to the same old dumb stuff that she always was on. But now she's just criticizing Trump. So great point. But LMA, yeah, so you wanted to push back, particularly, I think, when I mentioned R. Kelly and Michael Jackson.
Well, R. Kelly, I agree with you, but I put it this way, I got to look more into it, but I am not convinced that MJ did what he was accused of doing.
Okay.
I don't think he.
Okay, I mean, and that's cool. All I'm saying is, I don't know any man who wants to spend time in an inordinate amount of time with children, want them to spend the night at his home, and he doesn't have nefarious intentions. All I would say is he couldn't watch my children on TV. That's all I would say.
Okay,
I don't care.
That's fine.
I don't care.
But I just think that because, I believe he just had a affinity for children because of his own childhood, and it just looks strange. It's almost like if a black man, not black man. No, I'm saying.
Question. What about his childhood do you believe led him to have an affinity for children?
I don't think he had a childhood. I think that he was in the spotlight ever since he was 8 or 9 years old, and he did not get a chance to be an unknown child that just does regular childhood things. He was on, when you had children when you were a child, you were on the stage,
And I get it, but you can say that about Floyd Mayweather Jr. You can say that about Roy Jones Jr. You can say that about Ken Griffey Jr. You can say that about Janet Jackson, LaToya Jackson, Tito, Jermaine. A lot of people have had that experience, and they don't want to hang out with children.
But it's almost like, how can I put this? Just because you have, it's almost like, like you see most teachers, kindergarten teachers are women. No one would say anything about that. Or if a woman says, not woman, but just say a woman who's a kindergarten teacher says, I love children.
Right.
No one would bat an eye at it. But, it's almost like when a male says we give this extra layer of scrutiny.
So it's gender and misandrous. Got it.
Yeah.
No,
I'm just saying that.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
I'm not saying that he did it or that he didn't do it, but I'm just saying I don't have enough evidence that he did do it. And I feel as if that he may have just had an affinity for children that we may look at as being, kind of awkward or sometimes inappropriate, but I don't think that he did what he was accused of doing. Because there was a lot of people who were in his, Macaulay Culkin, Corey Feynman, a lot of people who were with him all said that like nothing ever happened. And so I think that it was a money grab, and that's my opinion. But anyway, I guess my question becomes also, it's tough for me, especially with Candace, like in terms of forgiveness or grace, because like I said, some of us, when we were younger, we've had some negative, before we were enlightened, had some negative views of, and I guess like when does that window for grace closes? I guess because there's a lot of people who probably did some just as trifling stuff as Candace, but we don't know them, and they'll just be able to fly under the radar, and have their, let's say, legitimate awakening or they're just trying to grift because this pendulum, this blackness pendulum is always going to swing. We were on the in the in the 90s, in the early 2000s, black people were up top. You know what I'm saying, socially wise, and now we're the pendulum swinging. Now you got the rise of white supremacists. So now we're taking a beating, and then we're going to overcome this, and then we're going to be on the upswing. So it's no telling, who was with us from the beginning. Are you, were you down with us when we were in the trenches, and now we just made it up, or you just, riding the wave? So
Right.
I, it's going to be difficult to determine her. Well, I don't want to use the word integrity because I don't think she has any. But I was saying that her intent, like I can't, we can never tell that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's difficult because I do want to have grace. Like there's a program, I jokingly say in the white community where they have a program to reintegrate former white supremacists, right? Like they're a member of the KKK, they're part of all these white supremacist groups. They looked at it and then they said, "Damn, I don't want to be a part of this." But it's almost like recidivism. Like if we don't give you a method so that you can reintegrate into polite society, and you have no other choice. You have a polite society that ostracizes you, that rejects you. So all you have left is the miscreants you were trying to get away from. So I struggle with this because I want to see all these these traitors get their comeuppance, but at the same time it's just like, but if you are legitimately remorseful and you understand the error of your ways, I'm trying to figure out where does my indignation end and my
grace begin. Yeah.
Grace begins. Yeah.
Well, so I think that there's a couple things we have to look at. One, we have to look at it. Were you someone who was simply ignorant, or did you benefit financially from doing this? What level of what's the term when you actually? And we find this in the criminal justice system. Sister Michelle, you can help me when people are restorative. Well, what type of restorative efforts have you engaged in?
Reconciliation.
Yes,
restorative justice.
So I mean that would be the situation where we tend to find that even those type of efforts typically are symbolic, right? But in a point to the KKK, former Klansmen, skinheads, etc., I would argue that typically when they integrate those people, they're simply teaching them how to become a better polished white supremacist.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean that's true too. But there have been a few who have actually, did the work and now they're on like speaking tours and they're really, it's not like they're being, and it could be, just a polished version, but they're going through and they're trying their best to disabuse these guys of their white supremacist thoughts. So there are some people who are going around doing that, and I can respect that. So I'm just saying, in the same sense, how do we? Because we have it for like gang members. People who were in gangs, they got out of the gang, and now they're on speaking tours to get people to try to create an environment that does not entice.
Right.
That people.
I agree.
So just that. Yeah, but go ahead.
This is why I would say they're teaching them how to be a more polished white supremacist, because they go from being a rather virulent white nationalist to a polished white nationalist, and they typically articulate that I'm no longer white nationalist due to what? The gospel of Jesus to Christ. And so now they're proselytizing Christianity, which is a form of soft white nationalist power. You follow me here?
Well, I mean, yeah, I feel you, but I mean, I can't say you looking over your eyeglasses like grandma used to do, man. That's what. But no, I get your point. I get your point in that sense. But I will have to look into it more. But I do recall there was a couple of white guys who were going around, and I don't think they were doing it because of. At least you. Okay.
I guarantee you they were getting paid. I tell you that much.
I mean, obviously going to get speaking fee.
Their dismissal, right, from white nationalism they're promoting a dismissal of white nationalism, but they're doing so in a manner that is financially expedient for them.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's always going to be anytime money gets involved, then people's integrity gets called into question.
Mm-hmm.
But you need, like you said, you need money to live. So I can't, I it becomes like it's almost like you got to take like the Libra scale, right? So how many, things do I see that are for you, and how many things are against you? And you just gotta weigh it out and try to determine whether or not you can trust this person or not. But I'm just saying that, because like I said, I think, put it this way, from my own sense of Schadenfreude, yes, I would love to see, all of these, uh, 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 black conservatives get their comeuppance. You know what I'm saying? I want all of them, to be left on red by their white daddy. You know what I'm saying? I want to see it, I don't mind seeing it. But at the same point is, one thing too, like, if you think about it, like, some of the greatest, how can I call it? Pro-black Pan-Africans used to be, on the conservative side, and they have, since they were over there, they know the ins and outs, and they feel that sense of betrayal. They will be blacks because they were over there and they have a deep hatred. You know what I'm saying? Because we may have a certain surface level hatred, but when you were in the trenches with them, you have a different level of disdain for that side once you've been over there. And so,
let me ask you this: have you experienced that a particular heightened level of disdain for the conservative or Republican Party because you were part of it? And I don't mean, I hope I'm not doing a deep dive, right? But could you kind of tell us what type of things you experienced that led you to having a visceral rejection of course?
Well, because like I said, I was more or less on the libertarian wing of conservatism, and I still do think that libertarianism has some good ideas that are worth exploring. But like I said, the institutions and people, to do all the talks or whatever would tell you up and down, how great Thomas Jefferson was, how great the founding father was, how wrong socialism is and communism is, and all this other stuff. And they would always talk about the non-aggression principle, right? That's like the big thing in libertarianism, non-aggression. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't bother me, and I can do whatever I want as long as I don't bother you, right? And so that was always the point. And they will always talk about, just go on for book upon book, but then they would talk about Thomas Jefferson, but they never, ever, ever talked about U.S. slavery, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I look back on that, like because like my kind of awakening kind of came from when I learned about Black Wall Street, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how it was burnt down to the ground. Because, in my mind, I was thinking to myself, because, my lack of education, it was, Black people were in the position that we were in, of African Americans, because there was just some moral failing on our side, right? If we just pulled up ourselves by our bootstraps, we can create a city, and then once we have that city, we can blah blah, go. But then when I learned we did have a city, and it was burnt down to the ground, and I'm like, wait a minute, we did everything that we were told to, we were supposed to do. We had a functioning city, and it was burnt down to the ground, and that was like the biggest pillar, because it's just like we did what we were said to, what was recommended, and when we did it, it was still burnt down. And that's when it really, like, that was like the biggest, once that pillar came crumbling down, everything else came crumbling down. And I started to look back on it. I was like, well, wait a minute. I've been listening to these libertarians for years, and they've never brought up, American slavery. They never brought it up. Like, you over here got, these white men crying about a 3% tax on tea, and right across the street, you have literally people who have no freedom, who are, be beaten, spat on, children sold. Like, this is a crime against humanity, but yet the libertarians never never talked about this. And, once I saw that, and then I just kind of saw the hypocrisy of, and like I said, I will say, when it comes to libertarians, I say that there's, what's what I'm looking for? There's libertarianism, the ideals of libertarianism, and then libertarians, the actual people who fill up the institutions, are completely different. And so I just kind of saw it as it's kind of blatant hypocrisy that, there's something bigger than the ideas of liberty that are going on here, right? So that you can live in a country built off of slave labor, but yet you have very little writings in support and condemnation of slavery here in America. But the one thing I saw was like, there's one guy, he was criticizing, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he was criticizing Abraham Lincoln, and his frustration with Abraham Lincoln was that now you've put all of us on a plantation. Basically saying that it's okay if the blacks are on the plantation, but as soon as you start encroaching on white people's freedom, now that's a problem. And when I heard it the first time, it never dawned on me. Like that was, I was kind of messed up. And then when I look back on it later in life, I was like, oh man, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe I was, supporting this. But at the time, like I said, I just didn't have a good understanding of, African American history, African American politics, just different thoughts. I had a very, very poor understanding and poor knowledge base when it came to it. So it was easy to pick me off because, I may hear something like, oh yeah, you need to pull yourself up, stop sagging your pants and stop committing crimes. You'll be okay. And, for a young, 20 something, like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, yeah, we do need to stop, shooting each other, smoking weed and all this other. It sounds right. It sounds good. As personally, yeah, you should engage in these types of behaviors, but the collective problems that we have aren't because a bunch of people just deciding to smoke weed. Like that's not our collective problem. Our collective problem is that we're the victims of white supremacy. We're the victims of, racist white supremacy. And we've been, ostracized, but like economically starved for the last 400 years we've been in this country. Like that was, that's the main reason why we have these issues. And the issues that you see, the pants sagging, the gang violence, baby mama, baby daddy, whatever, those are symptoms of a
larger structural issue. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so once I got that in my head, then my hostility towards, conservatism jumped up another level. So yeah. So that all that to say that once you have someone who is in it and then they deconstruct, they're going to be a lot, they're going to be how can I put it? The most ardent defender of or attacker of white supremacy, the people who've been inside of it. That's why I say I kind of give grace, because at one point I was, like, I'm glad that the whole Brexit thing and these black conservative, like the black conservative movement that we're having now, I'm so glad that didn't happen back in, 07, 08, because that's when I was in my heyday. You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad that it happened late, because I would have got caught up in that too. You would see me, I tell you, I would have that red hat on. I would be going crazy in them streets. Like if it would have hit, because I was just so far gone. I was so far gone. Like I mean, you couldn't tell me nothing. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't until I saw it, like, especially around that time around, I guess it would have been around, so you had Trayvon Martin, but it was just a string of like black people getting killed by the police. Like it literally took, like, I saw like a few of them and it didn't dawn on me. And then it wasn't until, like, I think it was the guy Crawford. Like Crawford was the one that was really started to like knock down the loose string. Like once that string, like we get like a straight string on like a sweater, if you pull it, it unravels the whole thing. Like Crawford in Walmart, when he got shot in Walmart.
Yeah,
that was
that
like the string. Yeah, that wasn't there. Yeah, that wasn't Ohio. Yeah. So it was that one, and then it was just like after a while, like after a few over, it was just like, okay, at first I was just like, well, you shouldn't have been running, you should have been pulled your pants up. But then by like third or fourth, I was like, all right, bro, I can't even defend the police at this point, So well, not defend the police, but I can't defend the situation. I've always been not always been against the police,
but you tend to be critical
I've always had
of the police. Yeah.
Yeah, I was always kind of critical of the police. Yeah, but like so I for that reason I pull myself back, because I like to go in on a I know you don't like the C word, so I'm gonna say a black conservative, put it that way, a black conservative. See, I said conservative. We all like to go in on, but like I said, I And sometimes I gotta have a little soft spot for him just because I was in there. I know how it is to be lost in the sauce, and I struggle with it because like I said, they're doing damage. Like some of the things that Candace Owens did was, I don't use the word unforgivable, but it was bullshit. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I was saying. Like when you're lost in the sauce, like you are a danger to everybody. You know what I'm saying? Because you think you're right,
including yourself.
and when you think you're right, and then you're getting paid, and you getting accolades, and your profile is going up, man, you'll say all types of shit, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I said, that's why I'm so grateful that all this shit happened after I had my deconstruction from conservatism, because I would have been out there with my red hat. You know what I'm saying? I was bad, man.
Thank you, LMA, for sharing that. It takes a
Absolutely.
lot to share that. And I appreciate you
Absolutely.
sharing it in this forum, because I also think your show, Dr. Lumba, is a therapeutic forum, where people can share, aspects of themselves in a safe space.
Yeah,
And,
I appreciate that.
And I appreciate Brother MLA sharing. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Sister Michelle, we're going to allow you to close out.
All right. Yes.
Absolutely.
Candace Owens. I will guess for almost nearly 10 years, this lady has been running a muck in the Black communities, particularly in the social media spaces, in terms of her claim to fame. And now she's being shown what her reward is on the presidential level. And honestly, I don't like it. But at the same time, you didn't see the humanity of your people as on your way up. And I guess if you had kept that ace in the hole, you may have had some stronger pushback. But again, she's continuing on with her program. So it is what it is. Like they say, they always break their tools.
Absolutely. And very quickly, family, we're gonna actually tap out. I always tell you all tap in, but we're gonna tap out because I gotta eat dinner. But sister, you mentioned Megan Thee Stallion, so this one is just for you. I'm gonna flash the ring. I don't cook, I don't clean, but let me tell you. Until next time, family, y'all know what to do.
All right, thank you.
Peace. All right. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on Black. Peace.